Well, we finally have some good news. We now have learned that the cost of living adjustment for Social Security has been announced. We will go over that in today's video. Also going to talk about what proposals are still on the table, what lawmakers are looking for, and what we're going to see in the very near future as a result of inflation. Again, all this stuff is extremely important when it comes to Social Security benefits in the future. So today, we are going to talk about the latest increase coming for more than 70 million Social Security recipients. If this is something that you are looking forward to, go ahead, hit that like button, and now let's begin. Look at this. Social Security monthly benefits will increase by 2.8% in 2026. That is exactly what was expected over the past several months. We were saying it was going to be anywhere between 2.6 to 2.8%. Then it went from 2.7 to possibly 2.9%. And then when the federal government shut down, a lot of people were saying that there's no way it's going to go up to 3%. It is likely going to be 2.7 to 2.8%, which is exactly what it is. That is now what will be locked in for 2026. I want to show you something. It says the increase for 2026 is larger than the 2.5% cost of living adjustment that beneficiaries received for this year, but it's far smaller than the ones from a few years before that. It says retirees' monthly benefits will rise by about $56 to an estimated average of $2,071 starting in January. Nearly 71 million people receive Social Security benefits. Okay, here's where things get interesting though. Okay, there's a lot of discussion as to how did this number come to be. Well, here's the thing. The way that the cost of living adjustment is calculated, it's based off of the third quarter of the previous year. So the cost of living adjustment for 2026 is based off of July, August, and September CPI reports. The CPI report for September was supposed to be released on October 15th, but due to the government shutdown, it was actually pushed back until this morning. Well, here's why some are not happy. Because the latest CPI report shows that, well, it is a little more than we were hoping for. Look at this. It says inflation rate hit 3% in September. It's lower than expected, but it says the long-awaited CPI report shows. I want to read a few things to you. It says the consumer price index showed a 0.3% increase on the month, putting the annual inflation rate at 3%, both lower than expected. It says excluding food and energy, core CPI showed a 0.2% monthly gain and an annual rate also at 3%, less than forecast. Okay, here's the problem. Listen to this.
Well, unfortunately, Kate, the snapshot is not a pretty one because we're back to 3% inflation in the United States for the first time since January. So these new numbers out show that prices were up by 0.3% between August and September. That's actually slightly better than expected. Okay. However, the annual inflation rate moved in the wrong direction from 2.9% to 3%. And as I mentioned, that is a new 8-month high for inflation. And when you look at the trend, what's important to remember is that inflation was going in the right direction, right? Earlier this year, back in April, inflation went down to 2.3%. That's the dip in the middle of that chart.
I do want to point something out and then we'll play the rest of this. But if you look at this chart, so right here, this is January 2025. This is the first month of the year. And it started to go down. Remember, this is also when President Trump stepped into office, was the end of January. But he stepped in and inflation started to plummet. What we were seeing was the Department of Government Efficiency, which was headed by Elon Musk at the time. They were doing ample layoffs, right? Thousands of people getting laid off, hundreds of thousands actually. And so it was coming down. Inflation was dropping. And then we got down here, okay? This is April. What was the event that happened in April? Well, President Trump announced tariffs, This happened on, I believe, April 2nd, where then tariffs started to put a little more upward pressure on inflation. And here's where we sit today at 3%. We still have tariffs that we have to contend with. Let's keep listening.
So that goes back to September, back when then candidate Trump was on the campaign trail saying inflation was out of control. But you can see clearly we're in a worse spot now than we were last fall, when inflation was maybe the biggest issue, certainly the biggest economic issue on the minds of voters.
Absolutely.
Okay. So yes, inflation went from 3% in January of 2025 down. Okay, it was what, 2.2%? 2 point whatever, I think 2.2, 2.3% in April, and then it all of a sudden ticked back up because tariffs were a major factor. Yes, we're bringing in some more money, which is great, and there is speculation that the Federal Reserve may go back and adjust the our long-term inflation rate. Do they want to stick at 2%, or should we adjust this to maybe a little bit higher? But at the same time, President Trump is wanting to completely get rid of the federal income tax if we're bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue. So that could be really good there. But here's the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention, okay? The cost of living adjustment is going to increase your benefits by roughly $56 a month. That's great. Here's the problem, okay? Look at this right here. Says the COLA increase was scheduled to be announced last week, but was delayed by the federal government shutdown. A good chunk of beneficiaries' COLA for 2026 will likely be erased by the increase in Medicare Part B premiums, which is expected to be released next month. The monthly premium for 2026 is forecast to jump to more than $206, up from $185 this year. That's a $21 increase. We are going to increase benefits by $21 a month for Medicare Part B premiums, yet you're getting $56 from the cost of living adjustment. Do you see the issue there? Roughly half of your cost of living adjustment will be eaten away by the Medicare Part B premium increase. And let's say you don't receive $2,000 a month. That means a 2.8% cost of living adjustment. If you're only getting $1,200 a month, well, that's pretty much your entire increase going to Medicare Part B. Okay, that's the concern. This is also why at this time, look at this, it says proposals suggest other ways to measure future cost of living adjustments. Some experts and advocates have questioned whether another formula would be better suited to measure the inflation retirees experience. Advocacy groups, including the Senior Citizens League, have lobbied to have the measure for the cost of living adjustment changed to the Consumer Price Index for the Elderly, or CPI-E. Says that puts greater emphasis on categories like medical care, housing, and recreation, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. And yes, it would. That would be a huge benefit to seniors. But at the same time, it would also increase the amount of money going out every single month. That's something that lawmakers say they have to be concerned with, because as of right now, the Social Security Trust Fund will become insolvent sometime in 2033. That is in 8 years. Some are expecting it is actually going to increase, and it would be insolvent sometime in 2032, which is less than 7 years. So we'll see what happens there. Now, I do want to point something out really quick. Okay, this could be a little bit concerning as well, that the October price data is unlikely to be released. This is according to the White House. They just said this today. It says right here, the U.S. government will probably be unable to release inflation data for October, that is what the White House says, due to the ongoing government shutdown. It says the funding lapse is preventing surveyors from deploying to the field, depriving us of critical data. It said it would be the first time in history the information is not published, the White House said. Democrats choosing to keep the government closed will likely result in no October inflation report, which will leave business markets families, and the Federal Reserve in disarray. Okay. And yes, I know a lot of people think that this data isn't extremely important, but as a trader, this data is extremely important. When we don't know what the projection, what the trajectory of the United States is looking like, it's tough to trade. Now you can do it. It's not impossible, but there's a lot of volatility. Just one little report comes out and says, just yesterday, for instance, there was a report that the United States was contemplating getting into quantum computers or computing to compete with China, and quantum stocks just started to skyrocket. They surged. And then a report came out and said, nope, we were lying, that the United States government isn't looking into that, and then everything tanked. So that's where we're at this time. So this data is extremely important. So the fact that they are saying that the CPI report, or really any reports, aren't going to come out for October, well, even though we're towards the end of it, these reports are going to come out in the next few weeks. It's pretty big, because what if, and just stick with me for a second, what if these new reports show massive inflation, where inflation jumps to 3.2 to 3.3%? That right there would be critical, especially when seniors have just been locked in on a 2.8% cost of living adjustment. And what we've seen historically is usually in October, November, and December, we normally see inflation go up, not down. Meaning, come January 1st, when your cost of living adjustment kicks in, you will likely already be behind, because inflation will likely be much higher than 2.8%. So, I'll leave you with that, but that is what we know as of today. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.